Ambassador Zakar straightened his ceremonial vestments, adjusting the ornate clasps with the lower two of his forearms while his upper appendages remained poised in the formal diplomatic stance of his species. The chitin plates across his thorax gleamed under the artificial light of the Galactic Council's Grand Chamber, an imposing circular hall where delegates from 50 interstellar civilizations gathered to deliberate the fate of countless worlds. Council Day 52847. A routine protocol session, or so the agenda claimed. Zakar had witnessed hundreds of such gatherings in his tenure, each following the precise, immutable procedures that had governed interspecies diplomacy since the Accord of Lumina Prime. Nothing ever changed in the Council's Grand Chamber. That was its purpose, its promise: stability, predictability, safety. Elysian Station orbited silently around the neutral binary system, its quantum barriers and adaptive shields monitored by the most sophisticated defense systems in known space. 3 fleets patrolled the adjacent sectors, and every delegate underwent 27 distinct security protocols before entering the council ring. In theory, not even a single unauthorized microbe could penetrate these defenses, which was why, when the slender human woman in the simple business suit materialized at the center of the chamber, pandemonium erupted. No alarms had sounded, no ship had approached, no signal had been detected. She simply appeared, standing on the central dais with perfect composure, hands empty and visible at her sides, completely unarmed. Breach! Commander Vorak's bioluminescent threat indicators flashed vivid crimson across his gelatinous form as he surged forward. Secure the human! Security personnel converged from all directions, crystalline wardens with their phase-shifting abilities, psionic sentinels with mind-scanning capabilities, and the massive guardians whose silicon-based biology rendered them virtually indestructible. The protection of 50 worlds, focused on a single human female who stood barely taller than a juvenile Thraxian. Honored delegates, the woman spoke, her voice somehow reaching every corner of the vast chamber without amplification. I am Dr. Elise Monroe of Earth. I request a private audience with the full council regarding matters of urgent galactic security. As she spoke, every data screen in the chamber flickered to display an identical image. A simple countdown timer, starting at precisely 60 minutes. High Arbiter. Quell's crystalline form fractured light in agitated patterns as he rose from the central podium. How did you breach our defenses? Where is your escort? By Council Protocol 47.3, all diplomatic envoys must... I apologize for the unorthodox arrival, Dr. Monroe interrupted with a gentle smile. But conventional methods would have triggered the automatic exclusion protocols your council established after the Proxima incident. Earth is not yet recognized as a full council member, so I chose a more direct approach. Zakar felt the chitin plates along his spine bristle. Every diplomat in the chamber recognized the implications. This human had not only bypassed the most sophisticated security measures in the galaxy, but had done so without triggering a single alert. The technology required for such a feat was theoretically impossible. Scanner, Commander Vorak demanded, his translucent form pulsing with threat displays. Full spectrum analysis. The security team surrounded Dr. Monroe, deploying their most advanced detection equipment. Zakar watched as the scanners hummed, probed, and ultimately fell silent. No weapons detected, reported the lead guardian. No transmitters, no implants, no augmentations of any kind. Counselor Thresh, representative of the militant Kathmor Directorate, slammed his armored appendage against the council table. Impossible. The human must be concealing something. No species can traverse interstellar space without technology. As the council chamber descended into heated debate, Zakar noticed a junior aide rushing toward him, eyes wide with alarm. The aide's voice trembled as he whispered, "Ambassador, urgent report from the observatory nexus. 3 star systems have vanished." "Clarify," Sakaar demanded, keeping his voice low. "The Hegemony Cluster, the Traders Coalition, and the outer reach of Sector 19. All disappeared from our sensors within the past hour. Completely gone." Sakaar felt his secondary heart stutter. Those were not random systems. All 3 had been involved in recent hostilities with Earth. High Arbiter Quell had apparently received similar intelligence. His crystalline form dimmed perceptibly as he addressed the chamber again. "Dr. Monroe, what is the meaning of this timer? And what do you know about the anomalies we are currently detecting?" The human's expression remained placid. "The timer represents the window of opportunity for this council to make a choice. As for the missing systems, they have been temporarily relocated to ensure their safety and yours during these negotiations." "They relocated?" Vorak's bioluminescence flickered in patterns of disbelief. "Entire star systems don't simply relocate. They do when they encounter sufficiently advanced technology," Dr. Monroe replied. "Those civilizations remain intact, their populations unharmed. They have simply been moved to a secure location while we discuss terms." The council chamber erupted in shouts, threats, and demands. Security personnel closed in tighter around the human, though none dared touch her after witnessing what apparently happened to entire star systems. Counselor Thresh's voice cut through the chaos. "This is an act of war. The Council must respond with maximum force. I motion for immediate military intervention against Earth." "And risk more relocations?" High Arbiter Quell countered. "We must understand what we're facing before taking action that might endanger billions more lives." Dr. Monroe waited patiently for the uproar to subside. When she spoke again, her voice carried the same unnerving calm. "Earth has no interest in conflict. We come offering oversight, not conquest. Our species has observed this council for several decades. We've monitored your weapons development, your territorial disputes, your genocidal campaigns disguised as security operations. The galaxy stands at a precipice, and Earth has determined that intervention is necessary. By what right?" Sakaar found himself speaking, surprising even himself. "By what authority does Earth presume to judge civilizations that have existed for millennia before humans achieved spaceflight?" Dr. Monroe turned to face him directly, and Sakaar felt a peculiar sensation, as if those human eyes could somehow perceive aspects of his being that even he could not. "By the right of necessity, Ambassador Sakaar. By the authority that comes from possessing the means to prevent catastrophe. We've seen this pattern before. Technological advancement outpacing ethical maturity. Species developing planet killers before developing lasting peace. The cycle ends the same way every time, unless someone intervenes." The countdown on the screen showed 30 minutes remaining. "What precisely are these terms you mentioned?" High Arbiter Quell asked, his crystalline resonance betraying deep concern. "Simple," Dr. Monroe replied. "Earth will implement a galactic oversight program, what we call the Maturity Initiative. All weapons of mass destruction will be cataloged and placed under joint control. Research into certain high-risk technologies will require supervision. In exchange, Earth will provide technological assistance, protection from external threats, and eventually, full partnership when each civilization demonstrates readiness." "You're proposing to turn sovereign worlds into protectorates," Thresh bellowed, "to strip us of our defenses and reduce us to vassals. We're proposing to prevent you from annihilating yourselves and others." Dr. Monroe corrected. "Your current path leads to extinction within 2 centuries. According to our predictive models. We offer guidance, not subjugation. As the council erupted once more, Zakar retreated to a private communication alcove. He needed information, real intelligence about Earth, not the propaganda and dismissive reports that had characterized most council assessments of the supposedly primitive human world. The records painted a disturbing picture. Earth had been considered a minor power, barely worth monitoring. Their ships were slow, their weapons primitive, their territory limited to a single star system and a handful of outposts. Yet somehow, in the span of just a few decades, they had apparently developed technology that rendered the Council's most sophisticated defenses irrelevant. Had they been concealing their true capabilities all along? Or had they experienced some exponential technological breakthrough? When Zakar returned to the chamber, the countdown showed 10 minutes remaining. Commander Vorak had established a perimeter of elite guards around the chamber, though it seemed a futile gesture after what they had witnessed. "We cannot submit to these demands," he insisted to the council leadership. "The moment we surrender our sovereignty, we lose everything." "And if we refuse?" High Arbiter Quell asked Dr. Monroe directly. "What happens when your timer reaches 0? The human's expression showed what Zakar thought might be genuine regret. "Then Earth will be forced to take more direct measures to ensure galactic stability. Half of the remaining systems represented here will be relocated to safekeeping, beginning with those possessing the most destructive capabilities." "You're bluffing," Counselor Thresh declared. "No species could possibly possess such power." Dr. Monroe sighed. "I had hoped to avoid demonstrations beyond what has already occurred, but perhaps visual evidence will be more persuasive." She raised her hand, and the chamber's central holographic display activated, showing real-time images of the 3 missing star systems, intact, functioning, but clearly contained within some form of dimensional pocket that separated them from normal space. "As you can see," Dr. Monroe continued, "the relocated civilizations continue to exist normally within their new dimensional parameters. Their planets still orbit their suns. Their people still live their lives. They simply exist outside the reach of the Galactic Council and its destructive conflicts." The countdown reached 0. In that moment, Zakar watched as conviction drained from the faces of every council member. The proof was irrefutable. This single unarmed human represented a power beyond anything their civilizations had achieved or even theorized. High Arbiter Quell was the first to speak. "The Council requests time to consult with our respective governments." "Of course," Dr. Monroe nodded. "You may have 6 hours. During this time, I will remain here, and my colleague will arrive to answer any technical questions you might have about the transition process." As if summoned by her words, a second human materialized beside her. A tall, dark-skinned man with silver-streaked hair and eyes that conveyed ancient wisdom despite his species' relative youth. "This is Dr. Marcus Nakamura," Dr. Monroe introduced. "He specializes in transitional governance and cultural preservation during oversight implementation." The council chamber, which had held 50 proudly independent species just hours before, now felt like a classroom awaiting instruction. 6 hours later, when the council reconvened, the physical arrangement of the chamber had been subtly altered. The hierarchical seating that once elevated certain species above others had been reconfigured into a true circle, with Earth represented at no higher position than any other world. Ambassador Zakar watched as Dr. Monroe and Dr. Nakamura patiently explained the terms of what they called the Maturity Program. Phase 1 would involve the immediate deactivation of the most dangerous weapon systems across all Council worlds. Phase 2 would establish joint oversight of dimensional research, artificial intelligence development, and bioweapon capabilities. Phase 3 would gradually transition authority back to local governance as each civilization demonstrated the necessary responsibility. You keep speaking of responsibility and maturity, Counselor Thresh noted with evident bitterness. As if we were children to be guided. In cosmic terms, we are all children, Dr. Nakamura replied gently. Earth passed through its own period of dangerous adolescence. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times before we understood that technological power without ethical advancement leads only to ruin. And who taught you this lesson? Zakar found himself asking. Who guided Earth to this supposed maturity? A shadow passed over Dr. Monroe's face. We learned the hard way, Ambassador, through catastrophes that nearly ended our civilization multiple times, through wars that scarred our planet, through mistakes we hope to help others avoid. That is why we intervene now, so that you need not pay the same terrible price for wisdom that we did. As the session continued, the three relocated civilizations were gradually returned to normal space, their representatives joining the council with chastened expressions. They had been the first to experience Earth's oversight, and rather than appearing oppressed, they seemed almost relieved. The hegemony has found the arrangement beneficial, admitted their representative, a being composed of interconnected neural filaments. Earth's advisors have already helped us resolve 3 internal conflicts that had persisted for centuries. By the end of what would later be recorded as the longest continuous council session in history, the Galactic Oversight Accord had been drafted, revised, and ratified by all 50 civilizations. Not through coercion, though the demonstration of Earth's power had certainly provided motivation, but through the growing realization that the humans might actually be offering salvation rather than subjugation. Ambassador Zakar found himself on Elysian Station's observation deck later that cycle, watching as the first of Earth's folded space-time ships arrived openly in the system. They were beautiful in their simplicity, sleek vessels that seemed to bend reality around themselves rather than forcing their way through it. He sensed a presence beside him and turned to find Dr. Monroe watching the same ships, her expression contemplative. Your people could have conquered us, Zakar observed. With technology like that, you could have simply taken whatever you wanted. A conquest is inefficient, she replied, and ultimately self-defeating. We don't want subjects, Ambassador, and we want partners. Partners. Zakar repeated the unfamiliar concept. In the Council's long history, there had only been rulers and ruled, predators and prey, victors and vanquished. The idea of genuine cooperation between inherently unequal powers seemed almost naive. Yet you doubt our sincerity, Dr. Monroe noted. I question your motives, Zakar clarified. No species acts without self-interest. True enough, she smiled slightly. Earth's self-interest lies in preventing the destabilization of this galaxy, in ensuring that the technologies being developed here don't cascade into an extinction-level event that could eventually threaten us as well. But beyond that pragmatic concern, there is something else. Which is? A potential? She gestured toward the stars visible through the observation port. Each of your civilizations has unique perspectives, art, philosophy, scientific approaches that differ from our own. Together, guided away from self-destruction, imagine what we might all achieve. Below them, on one of Elysian's lower decks, Earth technicians were already working alongside Council engineers, integrating systems and sharing knowledge. Not all at once. The humans were being cautious about which technologies they introduced and in what sequence, but enough to demonstrate good faith. It will not be easy, Zakar said after a long moment. Many will resist. Some will attempt to undermine your oversight. Of course, Dr. Monroe nodded. Change never is easy. But consider the alternative. Without intervention, our models gave the current galactic political structure less than 2 centuries before catastrophic collapse. Several major powers were within decades of developing weapons that would have triggered cascading retaliations. The death toll would have been incalculable. Zakhar's outer chitin plates shifted in the pattern that indicated deep contemplation among his kind. He had served the Council for most of his adult life, believing in its mission of maintaining balance between competing interests. Yet that balance had grown increasingly precarious in recent cycles. Ancient rivalries had intensified, arms development had accelerated. Perhaps the humans were right about the precipice they all faced. "There is something I still don't understand," he finally said. "If your technology is so advanced, if you can relocate entire star systems and bypass our strongest defenses, why reveal yourselves now? Why not continue observing from the shadows?" Dr. Monroe's expression grew solemn. "Because we detected something concerning at the galactic core. Something that will require the coordinated response of all advanced civilizations if we're to survive it." "A threat?" Zakhar felt his primary heart quicken. "What manner of threat could concern beings with your capabilities?" "That information will be shared once the initial transition is complete," she replied. "For now, establishing stability and trust must remain our priority." In the days that followed, the promised changes began to manifest throughout Council space. Earth advisors, always unarmed, always arriving without ships, appeared on key worlds. Weapons platforms were peacefully decommissioned. Research into particularly dangerous technologies was temporarily suspended pending new oversight protocols. Most surprising to Zakhar was the lack of resistance. He had expected rebellions, assassination attempts, sabotage, the usual responses to power shifts within the Council. Instead, he witnessed a spreading sense of relief, as if some terrible burden had been lifted from the shoulders of countless beings. "They're grateful," Dr. Nakamura explained when Zakhar mentioned this observation during a transition meeting. "Deep down, most sentient beings don't want the responsibility of apocalypse on their conscience. They don't want to live one diplomatic mistake away from extinction. What we've offered isn't just oversight, it's freedom from that existential dread." Zakhar began to understand as he traveled to various Council worlds in his new role as liaison to Earth's Oversight Commission. Everywhere he went, he heard the same stories, of weapons researchers who now slept peacefully for the first time in years, of planetary leaders who no longer faced impossible security dilemmas, of ordinary citizens who had lived their entire lives under the shadow of potential annihilation, suddenly discovering what it meant to plan for a future that seemed likely to exist. 3 months after what was now called the Monroe Intervention, Zakhar stood on the bridge of an Earth vessel, watching as human technicians carefully adjusted the orbit of a star that had been destabilized during an earlier conflict. The sight was humbling, not just the technological mastery it demonstrated, but the purpose behind it. These humans, who could have conquered or destroyed anything in their path, instead chose to heal, to preserve, to nurture. "We're ready for the ignition sequence," announced the ship's captain. A woman named Lydia Martinez, who had explained earlier that she had once been a stellar nursery specialist before joining Earth's diplomatic corps. "Ignition?" Zakhar inquired. Captain Martinez gestured toward a swirling mass of cosmic gas and dust that the ship had been carefully compressing for the past week. "A new star. This sector lost its primary during the Viridian conflict 3 centuries ago. We're replacing it." Zakhar watched in awe as precisely calibrated energy fields compressed the stellar material past critical density. In a flash of blinding light, nuclear fusion ignited at the center of the mass. A star was born. "Your people create stars," he murmured. "You move planets. You fold space itself. Yet you arrived at our council unarmed, asking for cooperation rather than demanding submission. Force rarely creates lasting change, Captain Martinez replied. Especially among beings capable of reason and growth. We learned that lesson painfully in our own history, as the newborn star stabilized, bathing the bridge in warm golden light. Zakar found himself asking the question that had lingered in his mind since that first encounter in the council chamber. What now? What happens to us, to all these worlds under Earth's guidance? Dr. Monroe, who had been quietly observing the stellar birth from the rear of the bridge, stepped forward. Now the real work begins, Ambassador. Now we learn from each other. Now we grow together. She gestured toward the star. That light will reach the nearest inhabited world in approximately 3 years. By then, if our program succeeds, the people there will be living under a new paradigm, not just of peace, but of purpose. Cooperation instead of competition, creation instead of destruction. Zakar watched the stellar flames dance across the view screen, feeling a strange sense of hope that had been absent throughout his diplomatic career. And our first lesson? He asked quietly. Dr. Monroe smiled. How to see ourselves as we truly are, not as isolated civilizations clinging to our differences, but as fragments of the same cosmic story. The universe doesn't recognize our boundaries. Ambassador, it's time we learn to see beyond them as well. As the Earth ship began its journey back to Elysian Station, Zakar reflected on how quickly everything had changed. In just 3 months, the political structure that had defined galactic civilization for millennia had been fundamentally transformed. Not through conquest or revolution, but through the simple, irrefutable demonstration that a better way was possible. The Council still existed, but its purpose had evolved from maintaining a precarious balance of competing powers to coordinating a collaborative future. Species that had been enemies for generations now worked side by side on joint projects, their ancient grievances not forgotten but somehow diminished in importance when viewed through the lens of cosmic perspective that Earth had provided. Not everyone had embraced the new order, of course. There were holdouts, resistance movements, those who viewed Earth's oversight as an intolerable infringement on their sovereignty. But they found themselves increasingly isolated as the benefits of cooperation became evident. 6 months after the Monroe intervention, Zakar stood in what had once been the Council's most secure weapons research facility. The space had been transformed into an institute dedicated to dimensional studies, the very technology that had allowed Earth to relocate entire star systems. Human scientists worked alongside researchers from 20 different Council species, carefully guiding them through principles that would have been deemed theoretical impossibilities just months before. The key wasn't technological, explained Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the facility's new director. It was conceptual. Most species approach dimensional engineering from a perspective of separation, creating barriers between spaces. We approached it from a perspective of connection, recognizing that all points in space-time are fundamentally linked. Zakar watched as a demonstration unfolded, a small object seemingly disappearing from one chamber and instantly reappearing in another. Not teleportation, which the Council had mastered centuries ago, but something far more profound. The actual folding of space itself to bring 2 distant points into temporary alignment. With this technology, interstellar travel becomes nearly instantaneous. Dr. Gupta continued. But more importantly, it allows for a new kind of cosmic perspective. When distance becomes effectively meaningless, so do many of the divisions that have driven conflict. The implications were staggering. Resources that had once been worth fighting over due to their scarcity and the difficulty of accessing them were suddenly abundant when any point in the galaxy could be reached with minimal effort. Strategic positions that had held military value due to their location became irrelevant when space itself could be reconfigured. You're not just changing how we travel, Zakar realized. You're changing how we think about territory, about resources, about security itself. Precisely. Dr. Gupta nodded. The maturity program isn't about restricting your civilizations, it's about expanding your conception of what's possible. That evening, at a diplomatic reception marking the first half-year of Earth's oversight, Zakar observed representatives from species that had been mortal enemies just months before engaged in animated conversation. The hegemony and the traders, whose territorial disputes had nearly triggered a sector-wide war the previous cycle, were now discussing a joint expedition to explore a previously inaccessible region of the galactic core. Remarkable, isn't it? Dr. Monroe appeared beside him, holding a glass of some earth beverage. How quickly ancient hatreds can dissolve when a new perspective is introduced. Not dissolved, Zakar corrected. Transcended. The conflicts still exist, but they seem smaller now, less urgent. That's an important part of maturity. She agreed. Learning to distinguish between what feels important in the moment and what truly matters in the larger context. Zakar's attention was drawn to a commotion near the entrance to the reception hall. A delegation from one of the few worlds that had openly resisted Earth's oversight program had arrived. Representatives of the Vorathi Imperium, a militaristic regime known for its expansionist policies. This should be interesting, Dr. Monroe murmured. The Vorathi have been particularly vocal in their opposition. The Vorathi ambassador, a massive being with iridescent scales and ceremonial battle scars adorning his face, strode directly toward them. Protocol dictated that Zakar should intercede. Technically, he still served as the official liaison between Earth and the Council worlds, but Dr. Monroe subtly signaled for him to wait. Ambassador Monroe, the Vorathi's translator unit projected his rumbling voice. The Imperium has reviewed your proposal. And? Her expression revealed nothing. We find your terms acceptable. The words seemed physically painful for the proud warrior to utter. The Vorathi Imperium will join your maturity initiative, effective immediately. A ripple of surprise moved through the gathered diplomats. The Vorathi had been expected to resist until the bitter end. They had even threatened to deploy their notorious planet cracker weapons if Earth attempted to force compliance. May I ask what changed your mind, Ambassador? Dr. Monroe inquired. The Vorathi gestured to a junior member of his delegation, who activated a holographic display. It showed a desolate, scorched landscape, the surface of a planet so thoroughly destroyed that not even its geological features remained recognizable. This was Vorathi Colony Alpha 9, the ambassador explained. Our most advanced military research outpost. 3 days ago, our scientists attempted to activate a prototype weapon designed to rupture the dimensional barriers around targeted worlds. He paused, mandibles clicking in what Zakar recognized as a gesture of profound discomfort. The weapon backfired. The entire continent where the facility was located simply ceased to exist. Our analysts believe the attempt to breach dimensional space triggered some form of automatic defense mechanism. Dr. Monroe's expression softened with genuine concern. Casualties? Minimal, thankfully. A scheduled evacuation drill had cleared most personnel from the area, but the message was unmistakable. Zakar understood immediately. The Vorathi had discovered firsthand that Earth's technological superiority wasn't just about what the humans could do. It was also about what they had already done to protect their advantages. The galaxy had been quietly seeded with safeguards against certain technological paths long before the Monroe intervention. Your scientists were attempting to develop countermeasures against our dimensional translation technology. Dr. Monroe stated. It wasn't a question. Yes. The Vorathi ambassador made the gesture of formal submission rarely seen from his proud species. We now understand that such efforts are not merely futile but potentially catastrophic. The Imperium wishes to learn, to grow, to mature, as you put it. Then you are welcome in the initiative. Dr. Monroe extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, the Varathi ambassador extended his scaled appendage to complete the ritual. As the reception continued, Zakar found himself drawn to the observation deck once more. The view had changed since his first conversation with Dr. Monroe 6 months earlier. Earth ships now moved openly through council space, their distinctive profiles instantly recognizable. But they were not conquerors or occupiers. They were teachers, healers, builders. A credit for your thoughts, Ambassador. Dr. Nakamura joined him at the viewport. I was reflecting on history, Zakar replied. Throughout the Council's existence, technological superiority has always been leveraged for dominance, for advantage, for conquest, yet Earth chose a different path. We had to, Dr. Nakamura said simply. Our studies of galactic history showed that conquering civilizations inevitably fall. The administrative burden of controlling unwilling subjects across interstellar distances eventually collapses even the most powerful empires. But partnerships, genuine collaborations based on mutual benefit, those can endure for millennia. And the threat you mentioned? Zakar asked. The danger at the galactic core that prompted your intervention? Dr. Nakamura's expression grew serious. It's time you were briefed on that. Dr. Monroe has scheduled a presentation for senior council representatives tomorrow. I won't spoil it, but I will say this. What's coming will require all of us, working in perfect harmony if we're to have any chance of survival. The following day, Zakar joined 24 senior representatives in Elysian's secure briefing facility. Dr. Monroe stood before them, her usual composed demeanor subtly altered by an underlying tension that Zakar had not observed before. Thank you all for coming, she began. What I'm about to share has been classified at the highest level within Earth's oversight protocols. Until now, only a handful of individuals outside our planet knew of this threat. The chamber's holographic systems activated, displaying a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. At its center, the galactic core pulsed with the dense light of millions of stars clustered around the supermassive black hole that anchored their cosmic neighborhood. 3 years ago, Earth's dimensional research detected an anomaly at the galactic core. Dr. Monroe continued. At first, we believed it to be a natural phenomenon, perhaps a particularly energetic phase of the central black hole. But continued observation revealed patterns that could only be artificial in origin. The hologram zoomed in, focusing on a region near the black hole where space itself seemed to shimmer with unnatural distortion. What you're seeing is a dimensional gateway, she explained. Not like the pocket dimensions we create for temporary relocation, but something far more vast and complex. It's a bridge between our galaxy and somewhere else. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled representatives. Is it an invasion point? Asked the Varathi ambassador, his warrior instincts immediately assessing the tactical implications. Not in the conventional sense, Dr. Monroe replied. The entity or entities on the other side appear to be studying us, much as we might study microorganisms in a controlled environment. They're not invading. They're observing, experimenting. The hologram shifted again, showing time-lapse footage of stellar movements around the galactic core. Zakar watched in growing horror as stars were systematically repositioned, their orbital paths altered in ways that defied natural physics. These adjustments began approximately 50 years ago. Dr. Monroe continued, They're subtle enough that most astronomical observation programs wouldn't detect them amid the normal chaos of the core region. But when viewed over time, a pattern emerges. The time-lapse accelerated, and Zakar saw it, stars being arranged into a massive geometric configuration that spanned thousands of light-years. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We believe it's a test," Dr. Monroe replied. "Or perhaps a message. The entity is reconfiguring matter on an astronomical scale, possibly to demonstrate its capabilities or to communicate in a language written in stars." "How does this threaten us?" demanded Counselor Thresh. "If these beings remain at the core, manipulating stars that no civilization has colonized, because the pattern is expanding." Dr. Monroe interrupted, her voice grave. "Each adjustment triggers cascading effects through gravitational influence. In approximately 20 years, these perturbations will reach the inner council worlds. In 50 years, the entire galaxy will be affected. The implications settled over the chamber like a shroud. Every civilization represented there depended on the predictable mechanics of stellar motion. Planets relied on the stable output of their suns. Entire ecosystems had evolved under specific conditions that could be catastrophically disrupted by even minor changes to their stars. "Can we communicate with these entities?" asked High Arbiter Quell. "Explain that their experiments threaten sentient life?" "We've tried." Dr. Nakamura stepped forward. "Earth has been attempting to establish contact through various channels for years. The entities either don't perceive our communications or don't consider them relevant. Then we must force them to acknowledge us," declared the Vorathi ambassador, warrior instincts flaring. "Demonstrate our power in terms they cannot ignore. That would be suicidal." Dr. Monroe shook her head. "These beings manipulate stars as easily as you might arrange objects on a table. Any aggressive action would likely trigger a response we couldn't survive." "Then what do you propose?" Zakar asked the question that hung in everyone's mind. "If we cannot fight and we cannot communicate, what option remains?" Dr. Monroe's expression softened into something like hope. "We evolve. We accelerate your civilization's development through the maturity program until you can join Earth in implementing the only viable solution we've found." The hologram changed again, displaying a complex technological schematic that Zakar couldn't begin to comprehend. It appeared to involve dimensional principles far beyond even the advanced concepts the humans had begun teaching. "This is what we call the harmonic shield," Dr. Monroe explained. "A network of dimensional resonators positioned throughout the galaxy, creating a field that would effectively isolate our reality from external manipulation. It won't stop the entities from observing us, but it would prevent them from altering our physical space. The technology is beyond anything even Earth can currently produce," Dr. Nakamura added. "But our models suggest that with the combined scientific talent of all council species, working in true collaboration rather than competition, we could develop and deploy the system within 15 years, just ahead of the critical threshold." Zakar studied the faces around him, representatives of civilizations that had spent millennia in cycles of conflict and mistrust, now confronted with a threat that made their ancient rivalries seem absurdly petty. "This is why you intervened," he realized aloud. "Not just to prevent us from destroying ourselves, but to prepare us for this greater challenge." "Yes," Dr. Monroe nodded. "Earth could not face this alone. Even with our technological advantages, the scale of the harmonic shield requires resources and expertise beyond any single civilization. We need you, all of you at your best." The chamber fell silent as the enormity of the situation settled upon them. This was no longer about oversight or sovereignty or the wounded pride of formerly dominant powers. This was survival in its most fundamental sense. "I believe," High Arbiter Quell finally spoke, his crystalline form resonating with formal significance, "that the Council should immediately elevate the Earth Maturity Initiative to highest priority status. All resources, all research facilities, all scientific personnel should be directed toward this collaborative effort. One by one, the representatives signaled their agreement. Even Counselor Thresh, who had been among the most vocal opponents of Earth's intervention, inclined his armored head in solemn acknowledgement of the necessity before them. As the meeting concluded, Zakar found himself walking alongside Dr. Monroe toward the station's central atrium. Above them, through the transparent dome, the stars shone with a beauty that now seemed fragile, imperiled. "You could have told us this from the beginning," he observed. "Revealed the threat immediately rather than focusing on our internal conflicts. Would you have believed us?" she asked simply. "Or would you have assumed it was a ploy to seize control? We needed to establish trust first, to demonstrate that Earth's guidance was benevolent before revealing why it was necessary." Zakar had to concede the logic. The Council's history was littered with fabricated threats used to justify power grabs and territorial expansion. Without the foundation of trust built over these past months, the revelation of the core entities would likely have been dismissed as human manipulation. "What happens if we fail?" he asked after a long moment. "If the harmonic shield cannot be completed in time." Dr. Monroe's gaze remained fixed on the stars above. "Then we adapt. Earth has contingency plans for partial evacuation to pocket dimensions if necessary. But such measures would be temporary at best. Our long-term survival depends on protecting this galaxy, our shared home." The atrium was filling with representatives from dozens of worlds, gathering for what had become a daily tradition, an informal assembly where ideas and knowledge flowed freely across species boundaries. Zakar watched as a young Thraxian scientist eagerly explained a theoretical concept to a group that included members of 3 formerly hostile civilizations, all now united in common purpose. "It's working, isn't it?" he mused aloud. "Your maturity program. Despite the resistance, despite the skepticism, we are changing. Faster than we anticipated." Dr. Monroe acknowledged with evident satisfaction. "Your civilizations have tremendous potential. Ambassador, all you needed was a common purpose greater than your differences, and a little guidance from beings who've walked this path before," Zakar added. Dr. Monroe's expression shifted subtly, and for a brief moment, Zakar glimpsed something ancient in those human eyes, a depth of experience that seemed at odds with her species' relatively brief history. "Yes," she said softly, "a little guidance." 1 year after the Monroe intervention, Elysian Station hosted a ceremony marking the official launch of the Harmonic Shield project. Representatives from all Council worlds gathered to witness the activation of the first prototype resonator, a device that represented the combined scientific achievement of 50 civilizations working in unprecedented harmony. Ambassador Zakar, now serving as executive coordinator of the project, stood beside Dr. Monroe as the device hummed to life. A subtle shimmer rippled through the demonstration chamber as a microscopically thin bubble of protected space-time formed around them. "It works," he breathed, reading the confirmation data on his interface. "On a small scale, at least." "It's a beginning," Dr. Monroe agreed. "The first of thousands that will eventually span the galaxy." High Arbiter Quell approached them, his crystalline form glowing with formal significance. "The Council has prepared a declaration to commemorate this achievement. With your approval, Dr. Monroe, we would like to formally recognize Earth not as an oversight authority, but as full partners in what we now call the Galactic Concordance." Dr. Monroe's surprise seemed genuine. "That's unexpected, Arbiter. The maturity program was designed to last for decades before full integration." "Circumstances change," Quell replied. "The threat we face has accelerated our development in ways none could have predicted." The Council believes that the original hierarchical structure of the oversight program no longer reflects the reality of our collaboration. As the ceremony proceeded, Zakar observed the transformation that had occurred in just 1 year. Species that had once viewed each other with suspicion or outright hostility now worked side by side, their unique biological and cognitive attributes contributing different perspectives to their shared challenge. The Varathi's strategic military thinking complemented the hegemony's abstract dimensional theories. The trader's resource management expertise enhanced Earth's technological implementation. "I wonder," he said to Dr. Monroe as they watched a demonstration of the next-generation resonator design, "if those entities at the core somehow knew this would happen." "What do you mean?" she asked. "Perhaps this was their purpose all along, not to threaten us but to unite us, to force us to overcome our divisions in the face of a common challenge." Dr. Monroe considered this. "An interesting theory. It would suggest a level of subtle intervention not unlike Earth's own approach to the Council. A teacher's teaching teachers," Zakar mused as the ceremony concluded. Dr. Monroe invited Zakar to join her aboard Earth's flagship vessel, the Harmony, for a journey to the edge of the galactic core. Special shielding would allow them to observe the entity's activities directly. The first such expedition since the Harmonic Shield project began. The journey took mere hours using Earth's folded space-time technology. As the Harmony emerged at the observation coordinates, Zakar stood transfixed before the main viewport. The galactic core blazed before them, millions of stars compressed into a space that seemed simultaneously vast and claustrophobic, all orbiting the invisible gravitational monster at the center. And among them, unmistakable now that he knew what to look for, the subtle manipulations, stars shifting in ways that defied natural motion, forming patterns that suggested conscious design. "We still don't know what they're building," Dr. Monroe said quietly, joining him at the viewport. "Whether it's a message, a machine, or something beyond our comprehension. But we've confirmed that the resonator technology affects their ability to manipulate our space-time. The harmonic shield will work." Zakar watched the cosmic dance unfold before him, feeling simultaneously insignificant and part of something immeasurably important. Will we ever understand them? These entities? "Perhaps," Dr. Monroe replied. "Once the immediate threat is contained. We hope to establish communication on a level they might recognize, but that's a challenge for the next generation. For now, we focus on survival." As the Harmony began its return journey, Zakar reflected on the path that had led him here. 1 year ago, he had been a conventional diplomat in a system built on suspicion and carefully balanced power. Now he helped coordinate the largest collaborative project in galactic history, working alongside beings his people had once considered enemies, including the humans, who had arrived unarmed but had changed everything. "You never explained," he said to Dr. Monroe as a Elysian station appeared in the view screen, "why you chose to appear alone that first day. No weapons, no ships, no obvious protection." She smiled slightly. "It was a demonstration, Ambassador. Not of power, but of trust. We needed to show that true strength doesn't require the constant threat of violence, that the most profound changes begin with a willingness to be vulnerable." "A lesson," Zakar realized. "The first of many," she acknowledged, "and one that appears to have been well received." As they disembarked, Zakar paused on the arrival platform, watching the steady flow of beings from dozens of worlds moving purposefully through the station. Scientists, engineers, philosophers, artists, all contributing their unique perspectives to a future none of them could have imagined before the arrival of a single, unarmed human diplomat. "What comes after this?" he asked Dr. Monroe. If we succeed, when we succeed in deploying the harmonic shield and securing our galaxy, what then? She looked out at the same bustling concourse, her expression thoughtful. Then the real work begins, Ambassador. Then we truly explore what we can become together. A newborn star ignites under human supervision, as Zakhar quietly asks. What's our first lesson?